Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a bit of a historical journey. We constantly hear about focus today as if it's this shiny new life hack, right? Like some trendy trick just to get through our inboxes faster. But honestly, that's completely backwards. Today, we're tracing the historical lineage of focus. We're going to see how intense, unbroken concentration isn't actually a modern invention at all. It's a historically proven weapon, wielded by some of the most influential minds in human history.
Our map for this historical expedition is the really phenomenal text, Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World by Newport. We're diving straight into the core insights here, looking at the meticulous research to uncover exactly how the titans of history built literal fortresses for their minds, and, more importantly, how you can do the exact same thing today.
All right, part one, the tower in the woods. Let's get into it.
So, let's leave the buzzing 21st century behind for a second and travel back to Switzerland. The year is 1922. The renowned psychiatrist Carl Jung was facing this massive intellectual battle. He was breaking away from the ideas of his mentor, the legendary Sigmund Freud. And to disagree with Freud back then, that was a remarkably bold, frankly dangerous move for his career. Jung knew that to outwit Freud and establish his own whole school of analytical psychology, he couldn't just be busy running around his Zurich clinics. He needed a profound level of depth. So what did he do? He went to a village called Bullinger and literally built a 2-story stone tower in the woods. Seriously, no electricity, he used oil lamps for light, a fireplace for heat. He guarded this isolation fiercely, noting that in his retiring room he was totally by himself and absolutely no one else was allowed in. He retreated not to escape his work, but to advance it to a world-changing level.
And this brilliantly illustrates a pattern that stretches across centuries. Jung was not some weird anomaly. Look back at the 16th century. The great essayist Michel de Montaigne worked in a private library built right into the southern tower of his French chateau. In the 19th century, Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer in a shed that was so isolated from the main house, his family literally had to blow a horn just to get his attention for meals. And jumping closer to our modern era, back in 1995, Bill Gates utilized these isolated think weeks out in a lakeside cottage to write the famous memo that completely pivoted Microsoft toward the internet. Greatness across all these centuries has almost always required profound, deliberate isolation.
What these historical figures were fiercely protecting is what Cal Newport defines as deep work. It's distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit. It creates new value and, crucially, it is incredibly hard to replicate. Think of an ancient blacksmith painstakingly forging a masterpiece sword with 100 precise intentional blows. Now, contrast that with shallow work. This is the non-cognitively demanding, logistical stuff we do while distracted. It's the modern knowledge worker acting like a human network router, constantly pinging emails back and forth, slacking people, without actually creating any new, lasting value.
Which brings us to part two, the age of distraction.
So what happened to this historical secret weapon? Well, this deep history was interrupted by a total obsession with visible productivity. It really started with Frederick Taylor's efficiency movement in the industrial age, measuring factory workers with stopwatches to maximize every single physical movement. But as we shifted into knowledge work, we couldn't easily measure the value of deep thought. Newport calls this the metric black hole. Because we can't easily measure the bottom line impact of, say, an uninterrupted hour of thinking, we just default to what's visible. We build these massive open office designs, like the ones championed by Facebook and Square, encouraging constant serendipitous interruptions. We've essentially created a culture where visible busyness, like replying to emails at all hours or being constantly active on corporate chat, has bizarrely replaced actual value creation. We are literally living in a historical anomaly right now.
Let's move on to part three, the Great Restructuring.
History is shifting once again, bringing us right back to the present day. So, the crucial point is that the new economy is heavily dividing the workforce into 3 groups that are poised to win. First up, you have the high-skilled workers. Think data forecaster Nate Silver, people who can creatively manipulate complex, intelligent machines. Second are the superstars, like star programmer David Heinemeier Hansen, who are the absolute best in their field and can now sell their services globally because, hey, geography doesn't matter anymore. And third, the owners, like venture capitalist John Doerr, who have the massive capital to invest in these new technologies. Now, if you don't have billions in capital lying around, your best bet is to join the first 2 groups. And how do you do that? You have to be able to master hard things quickly and produce at an elite level. both of which require immense, unbroken, deep work.
Let me tell you a story about a modern worker who saw this historical shift coming. Jason Ben was working in finance, essentially functioning as a human spreadsheet. He was doing all this shallow work that he realized could easily be automated away in a few years. He knew he needed to become a high-skilled worker, so he just quit his job. But he had a huge problem. His attention span was completely fried from the modern web. So he took a page straight out of history. He literally locked himself in a room with 0 computers. Just textbooks, note cards, and a highlighter. He forced his brain to go deep again. This intense focus allowed him to master coding, absolutely dominate a notoriously difficult developer bootcamp, and jump from a $40,000 salary to a highly sought-after $100,000 developer job. He basically used depth to rewrite his own economic destiny.
Okay, part 4, the science of focus.
Now, what's really interesting about Jason Ben's drastic strategy is that it wasn't magic, it was biology. It turns out becoming great at a skill physically alters your brain structure. When you focus intensely on a task, your brain builds a layer of fatty tissue called myelin around the relevant neurons. Think of it exactly like insulating a copper wire. The more myelin you have around a specific brain circuit, the faster and cleaner those neurons fire. To be great at something, to actually be a genius in your field, is quite literally just to be heavily myelinated.
And to trigger this myelination, you have to engage in what psychologists call deliberate practice. This means focusing your attention incredibly tightly on a specific skill and receiving immediate feedback to correct your approach. But here is the critical takeaway. Diffused attention absolutely destroys this process. If you're trying to learn a hard coding language or write a complex strategy document while checking your phone every 10 minutes, your brain's circuits are firing haphazardly. You are not building that thick, clean layer of myelin. This dense neurological reality is exactly why those historical figures instinctively sought out total isolation. Their brains literally demanded it to produce greatness.
Finally, Part 5, Philosophies of Depth. So how do we actually apply this historical and biological knowledge to our own chaotic lives today? The text identifies 4 distinct paths to integrating depth into your life. You have to actively choose the framework that actually fits your specific career and life circumstances, because trying to force the wrong one will just drain your willpower and lead to burnout. Let's quickly break them down.
Let's start by comparing 2 extremes. First is the monastic philosophy. The famous computer scientist Donald Knuth uses this. He tries to completely eliminate shallow obligations. In fact, he hasn't had an email address since January 1st, 1990. No way, right? He isolates himself entirely to focus on big thoughts. But look, if you have a boss or a team, doing this will probably get you fired. On the total opposite end of the spectrum is the journalistic philosophy. This is used by people like Walter Isaacson, who notoriously wrote a massive 900-page book on the side while working full-time as an editor. He trains himself to drop into intense deep work anytime a free 30 minutes opens up in his schedule. It's incredibly hard to master, but highly adaptable.
Now, for most of us, the middle ground is usually best. The bimodal philosophy involves dividing your time really clearly. This is exactly what Carl Jung did. He spent part of his year out in his isolated stone tower doing deep work, and the rest of his time back in the city, fully available to his clinical patients and the lively coffeehouse culture. Finally, we have the rhythmic philosophy. This is all about building a simple, unbreakable daily habit. For instance, doctoral candidate Brian Chappell used this by working on his thesis from 5 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. every single weekday, without fail, before his regular workday even began. These frameworks prove that even as a busy, hyper-connected knowledge worker today, you can absolutely build a fortress for your mind.
So, we've traveled from 16th century chateaus to 1922 Switzerland, right up to the modern era of intelligent machines. And I think the historical lineage is crystal clear. Deep, unbroken focus is the weapon of the victorious. So I want you to ask yourself right now, why does Carl Jung's 1922 retreat matter to your career today? Well, the economy is changing. Shallow work is being automated away faster than ever. The ability to concentrate intensely is becoming incredibly rare. Exactly at the moment is becoming incredibly valuable. So what's it going to be? Will you let the pings and notifications of the modern world dictate your potential? Or will you claim this ancient weapon, build your own metaphorical tower, and join the focused few? The choice is entirely yours. Keep learning, keep focusing, and we'll see you in the next explainer.